and welcome to WRBB and WRBB Studios. You know, we live in Florida and it's a paradise, but there are just things here that are part of what I would call our infrastructure of exotic species or things that really don't belong here that were brought here.
Yes, invasive or non-native.
Invasive. So with me is Jessica Carroll of EcoIs, and you are an expert when it comes to these things that do not belong here, and we don't know what the heck they are.
I would say I'm getting very close, yes.
Okay. How long are you in the industry?
A little over 10 years.
Why'd you even get into this industry?
Always loved animals.
Okay.
So I started out doing wildlife rehab and got into animal rescue. And we had a board of directors, and we've kind of developed from there, looking for a program that would help Florida and its ecology and be more on the conservation end.
Okay, so it's funny because I come from up north.
As do I.
When I moved here, all of a sudden I seen a bunch of lizards.
Yes.
Do they belong here?
Some of them do.
Okay.
If you take a look at the anole, which is the most popular lizard, the very small one,
right.
We have a green one and we have a brown one.
Okay.
The green one is native, the brown one is not. So if you think back 20 years, there was a bunch of green ones and some brown ones. But the brown ones are very detrimental to the green ones' ecology and how they live and survive. So now if you go outside, it's very rare that you'll see any of the green anoles, which are our native anole, and the brown ones have kind of taken over.
Okay, so just because they've taken over, are they bad for our ecosystem or not bad? Because some that were brought here are not bad for us.
Yes.
They just were never from here.
Right. I don't know all the specifics on the brown anole, but they are listed as an invasive species, so that tells me that they're not the greatest thing. But you have to look at a lot of factors when you're determining, is this animal going to inhibit or be a productive member of the ecology? So that is determined by things like, what are they eating? Are they taking another animal's food source that is a native animal? Are they competing with our native animals in any other way, which the brown anole will fight? They're more aggressive than the green anole, so they will actually fight with the green anole and cause damage to them that prevents them from eating and obtaining food and living a normal life.
Okay, so staying on the lizards, there is, I believe, an issue with iguanas.
Of course. Iguanas have been here, I want to say, since the 1950s. They have just recently had a population boom that made them out of control, and some of this was probably behind the scenes for the past 20 years. The iguanas is one of the things that got us into developing this education center. FWC, which is Florida Fish and Wildlife, just recently banned iguanas and 16 other species, which means that you are now not allowed to own an iguana as a pet or sell them to anyone who is not licensed.
Okay, so what happens if I had an iguana for 8 years?
You can get a free license through Florida Fish and Wildlife. It's a grandfathered in license as a pet license, and they send out notices and everything. Ultimately, you're responsible for checking the details of this. But I do believe that rule went into effect in November, and so there are still free licenses available if you do have an iguana or one of these other things that are listed on the new list of species. So if you need a pet license, definitely go to the FWC website, which is myfwc.com, and you can get licensing information there or call them.
You know, it's interesting because I think the iguana issue is that they're cute little animals, but they grow extremely fast.
Yes.
And they can grow extremely large.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
and people then just leave them out.
They also are an egg-laying animal. So
Okay.
we're not talking about 1 to 8 animals born. We're talking, could be upwards of 30 to 50 born per clutch of eggs that are laid. So they reproduce very quickly. The other thing, not only with iguanas, but most invasive and non-native species, is that Florida's climate allows for a lot of these animals to live here at any time of the year because it's so mild. So they can live here without detriments like cold weather. So that makes it possible for a lot more animals and a lot more species to survive here in our climate, which is why the invasive species is a big problem.
So is the problem and here's what I mean, and as I said, the problem is not the iguana per se or whatever. The problem is the people. Because we
Yes.
brought them here,
Yes.
and then they grow to where we can't handle them, and then we let them go.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is everything comes back to being a human based issue to begin with. There are some instances like I want to say Hurricane Andrew, which was back in 1994.
Okay.
There was a large fish farm that had a lot of exotic fish in tubs, and Hurricane Andrew knocked the tubs over. So all those fish that are all invasive species, exotic species, were released into our waterways in South Florida. So now we have all these invasive species of fish and crawfish and different things that have invaded the waterways. So it's not just land animals and lizards. This is affecting every ecosystem across Florida.
Well, so we know one of the other issues that we have is snakes.
Yes.
Okay, and I know that they put on a hunt every year in the
Yep.
Everglades.
Yep.
For.
The reticulated python, Burmese python, anacondas, pretty much anything, any snake, any large snake you find down there is not going to be belonging there.
And going back to that, someone brought them here.
Yes.
Okay, they didn't get on a boat.
No.
Okay, and come here.
Yep.
So someone brought them here.
Yes.
And they think that they just couldn't take care of them, and they said, it's one snake, I'll just let it go.
Sometimes that is the case. And we have been going back years. We were trying to educate people on pet care and why not to release your pets. FWC has also developed the Amnesty Pet Program, where now if you have an animal, like let's say you had it for 8 years and it's now a licensed animal and you can't get a free license, so you have an animal that's not licensed that you should have a license for, you can turn it over to the FWC Exotic Amnesty Animal Program with no questions asked. You won't be fined. You can turn the animal in and it will go to an approved adopter on their list.
Then that's really, really interesting. Okay, so lizards, snakes, fish, what else? Birds?
Yeah, there's a lot of birds. A lot of the invasive or non-native species we see are located mostly around airports. So I don't know if you've heard any stories about like Miami or the Fort Lauderdale airport. There are large colonies of parrots, monkeys, different things surrounding the forests and whatnot around the airport, because when people were originally, these animals weren't here, so they
Right.
imported them from somewhere. And what would happen was when the plane was in shipment, if they hit turbulence, the cargo would come loose and boxes would open. So when they opened the airplane, these animals would run out. So that
it sounds funny, but it's really pretty
Yep.
serious.
Yeah, so that's why we have all these. We have Quaker parrots all the way up to Vero Beach, to my knowledge, maybe even further north. There's stories of monkeys down in Palm Beach and Miami. There is definitely a colony of rhesus macaque monkeys up in Ocala at one of the springs that have been there since 1954 when they filmed a Tarzan movie.
And they brought them.
They brought them for the movie and they couldn't catch them all when they.
Oh my God. Okay, so now you have all these animals. What's the most dangerous or the most detrimental to our ecosystem?
Right now, it's probably going to be the big snakes in the Everglades, because they are really. They've probably been there longer than we knew, and so they're getting quite large now, and they are causing a lot of destruction to native animals like the alligator that just came back from. We worked so hard to bring it back from the edge of extinction where it was endangered, and the FWC has done a lot with population control and helping them to recover. And now you have these large snakes in the Everglades that are eating them as snacks.
So, we think alligators, they're pretty large, but they start out smaller.
Yes, they start out about, I want to say 12 inches, though I'm not too sure. They may be a little bit smaller, like 8 or 9 inches.
Eggs.
After they hatch from the egg, yes. And so a baby alligator actually has a lot of competition to survive. They don't have a great survival rate, out in the wild, because everything picks them off. Birds, bigger alligators.
Yeah, really?
Oh, yes. Yes, a larger alligator, especially males, will eat babies.
Wow. I've been around 64 years, and there are so many things that I don't know, and that's why I always say, if you need information, always ask an expert, okay? Because we can't focus on everything, and that's why different people do different things. So what's the future for EcoIs?
We are setting up a zoological exhibit location in Fort Pierce, and excuse me. We want to educate people, the public, and we be open to the public. We'd like to educate people about the invasive species. We want everybody to be able to see some of our native species, like the panther, bobcat, bear, learn about foxes. We actually only have one native species of fox, which is the gray fox. The red species, the red fox, which everybody knows about,
Right.
is actually a non-native.
Oh, wow.
But that fox is beneficial to our ecosystem, so we protect it.
And
So it does go both ways.
I
but
was
it's
going to
very
ask
rare.
you that. Have things been brought here accidentally or whatever and been a benefit to us? Obviously, the red fox being
Yep.
one. What else?
It's probably going to be hard for me to think of right off the top of my head because there aren't many.
No, I would
So
think
we've
most are on the
been-
negative
Yes.
side than
Yes.
the positive side. You know, and most of us won't see a Florida panther in
Right.
our lives.
Right.
I have people here that have been here for years, never seen an alligator.
Yep. Yeah, we're
Okay.
planning on having alligators. Hopefully, we can get a crocodile, a bear. We want everybody to meet the native species to see what we're trying to protect and learn about those animals. And then our tour will continue into the non-natives and the exotics and teach people about how detrimental they can really be to those animals.
And we talk about things like bees, how important
Yes.
bees are.
Yes.
Okay? Bees are so important, yet as soon as we see one, we want to kill it.
Yep.
Okay? And I personally think that most of the animals, if you leave them alone, will probably leave you alone.
Yeah. It's
Okay?
usually the way it goes.
Right, because, you know, what I've learned, and I don't know how right it is that sharks don't even like the taste of people.
That's correct.
Okay? It's just we're moving around, they think it's a fish. And the other problem that I have is that we complain as we become the ones that invade their territory.
Space. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We have a lot of that with a lot of people looking into doing homesteady things and buying small, like 2 to 5 acre farms, and then you'll see tons of posts on Facebook with videos or their night camera caught a panther coming in or a bobcat coming in after their chickens. But yes, you're allowed to take action to control that happening, but you should be putting up barriers that they can't get through,
Right.
so that you're preventing and protecting your
But
animals
that's
that way.
kind of really the cycle of life anyway. And they have to eat too.
Yes.
Just like the and we're running out of time, but the nightmare, I think, for a lot of people is raccoons.
Yes.
And they are, for lack of a better word, herd animals. And I'll give you a quick story. A friend of mine had ferrets, 2 ferrets.
Mm-hmm.
And the ferrets were on the porch. And they used to throw, one raccoon was there, and they used to throw food out to that raccoon. Well, all of a sudden, over time, there were hundreds of raccoons.
Yes.
They tell one another where the food is. They pulled the ferrets out of the cage.
Yes.
Okay? They are extreme. I rescued a raccoon, had it for about 8 months, bottle fed it. My wife at the time was into that, bottle fed it. And we released it because that's what we're supposed to do. I mean, if you're saving an animal, you're saving animals, one thing. And she was vet tech, so that was her thing. And he would come back and sit on our fence, but he was out in the wild doing his thing. They're so smart.
Yes.
But they are a nightmare
They can be. Yes.
because they know how to use their hands.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And they have claws.
Yeah. We have 4 raccoons at our
Okay.
facility, and 2 coatimundis, which are a cousin to the raccoon that comes from South America. So the further south you go from Texas down south, you will encounter more coatimundis and less raccoons.
Oh, wow.
But we have the 4 raccoons, and they can be quite a handful at times. But we have a lot of wild raccoons on our property that we're developing, so we see them running all the time, and they definitely they've got a great nose, so they can smell where food is. And my example for that for you is we pick up donated produce and fruit on a daily basis. So when we're distributing the produce and fruit, we make piles in the field for the pigs and the cows, and it doesn't matter if we move that pile to the other side of the property, the raccoons will be there within 30 minutes.
And I think they tell one another.
If we park the truck with the produce on it, they find it. Right?
They're unbelievable.
Yeah.
And like we bought ours from a baby because the
Yep.
mother was killed, and he was so loving and so sweet, hand raised, a little different than wild, you know. But we didn't want to get him where he was relying on us,
Right.
Because he really needed to be out in the wild. That's really
Yes.
where they belong.
I'm going to touch base on that really quickly because it is illegal to take animals from the wild in Florida, at any animals. So legally, to raise an orphan wildlife of any kind, you have to have a rehab license. And the reason I'm saying this is because what happens is a lot of people will raise them like that, but not want to let them go.
Right.
And once they're 2 to 3 years old, when they hit sexual maturity, they can get very, very aggressive and it's not the friendly raccoon that grew up with you anymore.
And she's always been in the vet thing with the exotics and with the birds. And it was hard to let him go.
Yeah.
But it was just something that we had to do. He was in a building that we bought by himself.
Oh.
Not eating. He was probably a week old, 2 weeks old. And he would have never survived anyway.
Yeah.
So, but that was kind of cool. All right, we're at the top of our time. How do people find you? You have a website?
Yes, www.eco-is.org.
Okay, and a phone number?
772-444-2326.
Jessica, it's so great what you do because we need this education because we live here and we need to know what belongs here and what doesn't belong here and how to treat them. So I can't wait for the facility to open and come by.
Yes,
with that,
that'd be
everybody,
great.
try to deal with professionals so you know what's going on. I want to thank Jessica for coming on. It was a pleasure. Everybody,
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.